Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So today I'd like to have a brief discussion on how to import table data into Matlab using the readtable function. We're going to show how to do this with some common file formats such as Excel and CSV files, and we'll also show some potential pitfalls and problems with the default behavior of readtable and show how to solve these problems using the Matlab import data wizard. Okay, so before we fire up Matlab, let's take a look at some data files. So I've gone ahead and made myself a little folder of Excel files, and if you look at this, it's just a bunch of different files that I would like to get into Matlab. So let's take a look at this first one here that I'm calling file structure a.xlsx. So if I open this up in Excel just to familiarize with myself with what the data is, you'll see this is a really simple system. Maybe let's pretend that this represents like file and folder structures within some project that I'm working with. So you can see here are the 4 different files, and then here are their paths, maybe things like their date modified, how big the files are, maybe I've got some flag denoting if these files are critical or not, and maybe I've got a comment, right? So I've got this fully populated table which has 4 rows and 6 columns. Right? So all I want to do is I want to get all of this data into Matlab, including things like what the headers are, and I basically just want to read and import all of this into Matlab. So let's go ahead and actually before I fire up Matlab and jump over there, I will mention if you want to follow along and get a copy of all of these files so you can run this on your machine as we're going through the process, check out the link of this video in the description. There's a download URL where you can get all of these files. Okay, so with that being said, let's go over here to Matlab, and you'll see that Matlab makes this really easy. There's a function called readtable, which literally will go ahead and if you give it the directory, or excuse me, the file name, you pass this to readtable, it will just simply return an entire table. It will literally read in that table. So that's all I'm going to do down here. Let me uncomment this line. So we're going to say that the file that I care about is the one we just looked at, file structure A, okay? So if you run this, you'll see that yes, this indeed pulls in all of that data, and it just read the table. So you get this nice 4x6 table object, right, which has all that information. And I'll just go ahead and let's put the Excel file underneath. Right, so you can just quickly see that, yeah, this looks like it worked flawlessly, right? It got all 4 rows, all 6 columns, and it pulled in all of the information appropriately, right? Okay, so that seemed to be no problem. Let's go ahead and look at, well, what happens if your table maybe isn't complete, right? There's a lot of times in real life where you don't have all the information in your data, right? So let's go over here and maybe let me go ahead and pull up, let's look at file structure B. So you're going to notice here that file structure B is really similar to file structure A. In fact, if I put the two of them side by side to one another, or as much as I can with this screen, right? So A is up here on the top, B is on the bottom. You'll see the only difference is that some of these cells are missing data, right? So these yellow cells are empty, right? So what I'd like to do now is, let me undo all that, is again, same thing, just I would like to import all of this data, these 4 rows and 6 columns into Matlab, and what's it going to do when it's missing data in these entries? Let's see. Okay, so I'll hit don't save, close this guy, okay, and then we just come over here to Matlab and do the exact same thing. So let me comment out this and uncomment this, okay, so now we're going to import that one we just looked at, which has missing data, okay? So I run this again, and look at this. This is great. It's still got all 4 rows, all 6 columns, but now in some of those empty entries, right, it's going to actually show NaNs, right? And again, just for completeness, let me go ahead and pull up file structure B so we can look at them side by side, right? So we see that the Excel table, right, in locations where it was missing data, here, here, and here, right, you see that Matlab will fill these in with not a time right here and not a number here, okay? So this is interesting, no problem, okay? Now, let's play some more games, okay? And I want to show you where this could potentially go wrong and why this is a little bit interesting. Let's go look at file structure C. Okay, so let me pull up our files again. Sorry, I moved this off to another screen, so I got to recover it. okay, over here. Okay, let's look at file structure C. Okay, so file structure C, when we open this up, let me close some of these other ones so we, okay, so this one is also, it looks like the original full table, except it's missing a single entry in this first row. Okay, it's just missing the file size in kilobytes in this first row. Okay, so let's go and see what does Matlab do in this case. Let me close this, come back over here to Matlab, uncomment. Okay, so this worked fine, and look at this, it does get this, right? It's not a number, right? We still get all 4 rows, all 6 columns, right? So that was missing a single entry in the top row. Let's keep going here. Let's go look at file structure D. Okay, now I am missing multiple things in the first row, and I'm missing something in the second row. Okay, so again, you're missing some stuff. Let's see what happens now when you just use readtable. Okay, so come over here to read this, comment this out, this one. Okay, and uh-oh, look at this. Whoa, look at it. We only have 3 rows and 6 columns. So something happened. It missed it, right? Let me open up file structure D again and we'll compare and see what ended up happening, right? So if you put up Matlab up and you put the original file up, you can see it missed this row completely. It skipped it. So I don't know about you, but the engineer in me just says, uh-oh, I really don't like this when I thought I read in the whole table, but you actually missed the data, right? Losing data is not a good thing, right? So it missed this first entire row, but it did somehow nail this second row, right? It got a non-number here, right? So this is a little bit concerning, right? And in fact, why don't we push this a little bit further? Let me get another file, our last one that we're going to demonstrate, file structure E. Okay, so this one, if I open this up, this is missing more data, right? It looks very similar to what we just looked at, namely, you're missing a ton of stuff here in the first row. You're also missing a lot of stuff in the second row, right? In fact, I think all I did between D and E, right, is I deleted some data here and here, right? That's all we're doing, right? So there's more empty data, right? There's more missing data in this file. So now let's go ahead and take a look at this. Run this. Yikes, look at that. I ran this and now you get a 2x6. So now it's missing more data. Whoops, sorry, wrong file. Here we go. Now we can look at the 2 of them, right? It missed these first 2 rows completely, right? It only read in these second 2 rows. So we've got a little bit of a problem in the sense that, why don't we go ahead and make a quick set of notes here. So the full table, this was pass, right? It had no problem reading in the full table. It had no problem reading it when you were missing entries after the first row. It had no problem reading it when you were missing just 1 entry in the first row. But when you were missing like more than 1, or in our case we had 3 entries that were missing in the first row, this was a fail, right? And then this was also a fail when you were missing 3 entries in the first row, and then there were some additional missing entries in the subsequent rows, right? So these 2 cases are concerning to me, right? It seems like the default version of readtable seemed to have missed something, okay? So why don't we fix this problem and look at how can I make this importing process a little bit more robust? Alright, so we really want to investigate what's going on in these cases. Why is Matlab missing some rows when it's trying to do this import? So one handy way that we can kind of understand what's going on during this readtable import process is actually, let's come over here to the Home tab and let's use the data import wizard to try to import this data. So if I click on this, it's going to point me and ask what file do I want to look at. Tell you what, let's look at number B first. This was the one which was, that it worked, it was just missing a few entries. So if I open this up, you'll see, aha, look at this. Matlab is going to show me where does it think there might be a slight problem, right? So it says, okay, these yellow entries, it's going to replace these things with NANs or NATs. So what's also interesting is you notice here in this data import wizard that MATLAB is scanning the file and it's trying to understand what type of data is in each column, and it's picking a data type. So in this first one, it was basically a string, right? This was the path to all of the data, right? So it recognizes that these are like basically some category. You can change this to text if you like. That might even make better sense in this situation. We'll mess with this a little bit later, but so we're going to leave this here. And over here, you can see, for example, the file name, it recognizes these don't have any special characters. These are just kind of normal ASCII text, so it chooses text. And here, it recognized that those were dates, so it chooses date time. It chooses these as numbers. Critical file, it also calls a number, and text. So anyway, you see what's going on here. And what's nice about this data import wizard is it allows you to do all sorts of things, like you can add different types of rules. So for example, if I want to change what types these unimportable cells, aka these yellow cells, are imported with, you could change that right here. Maybe I want -1s instead of NaNs. Okay? So anyway, you can see it's going to grab all of these highlighted cells and import them, which makes sense, right? It's 4 rows, 6 columns. This looks correct, right? Tell you what, let me close this data import wizard, and let's try to do the same thing now again with one of those things that didn't work. So namely, I don't know, like this one, D or E. Either one of these two failed, right? Let's look at this one. Now, here you can see what the problem is. For whatever reason, MATLAB has decided to not import this top row, right? You can see it's not highlighted. So, one way that we can do this to fix this is we can change the range of this, okay? So, instead of starting at A3, I actually want to start at A2. So, I'm going to click here on the top left corner and then click on the bottom. Oops, sorry. I'm going to select all these like such. Right? And now you see we've got the range from A2 to F5. Now this should hopefully work. Okay? So if I'm going to now hit import selection, I could do this, and this would just import this into the MATLAB workspace. Okay? But what I'm going to actually do is if you click on the bottom portion of this, you're going to get a data or options to do some of these. I could generate a script, or I could generate a function which is going to do this import operation. And what I mean by that is it's going to use all of these options like that we just talked about, including this different range, right? So I like to use this generate function because I feel like it's the most reusable. Sometimes generate script is nice so you can see what's going on, but really generate function it's going to show you all that and encapsulate it into a function, which is going to be handy as we're going to see in a second. So let's go ahead and click on generate function. And you can see what MATLAB does is it goes ahead and it auto-gens a function. Right now it's called import file. We're going to change that in a second. But anyway, what this thing does, right, is it shows you all of these options that we just talked about. Namely, also the thing that's important is where do we start? So we go from row, basically from 2 to 5. So starting at row 2 all the way to 5, right? 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's 4 rows, right? So, and it's got all this stuff we just talked about, right? How is it going to treat each column? Is it going to be a category, a string, a date time, a number, etc., etc.? So it's got all of this stuff embedded into this nice function. So, tell you what, let's go ahead and save this function right now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S to save this. I'm going to put it in the same location where I had my demo script so I can call this. Let's call this something a little bit more descriptive. How about import XLSX data? Right? This is importing my Excel data. Okay? So I'm going to save that, and then obviously I probably have to come up here and change the name of the function to be matching the file name. And now I'll save this again, Control S, and now we should be ready to use this function to demo and hopefully fix this problem. So let's come over to our demo script, and maybe let me put these on either side. All right, we could do something like this. Okay, now what I'm going to do is instead of using readtable, let's comment this out. Okay, instead what I want to do is I'm going to use this custom script that was just created, right? And I'm going to pass it that. So basically, this is, you can almost think of as a new and improved and customized version of readtable. I mean, at the end of the day, what this script does is it does do a read table, right? That's all it's doing. But you can see it's got all of the options that are hopefully going to fix some of these problems that we've got, right? Okay, so tell you what, let's just do this and just double check that this all works. So let's again start from the top, right? This was our simple Excel file. So if I run this, whoopsie, not enough import. Oh, okay, all right, sorry. So if you look here, this is where this gets interesting, right? It made this with a bunch of options, right? You've got to give it not just the file name, but you got to tell it what sheet do you want, what data lines do you want. So you can definitely, we could fix that if we want. Or one thing that I like to do is, in fact, the reason I like to make these functions here is you are now free to kind of play with this function as much as you want, right? So for example, what we could do is I could change this. Let me go ahead and delete some of these. So for example, let's take these out because all I want to be able to do is pass it a file name. Okay, so I might need to now start commenting out some of these. All right, and then we might need to kind of scroll down and modify some of this other code. So for example, since we're not checking the sheets and the range anymore, let's comment out all of this. Okay, and then let's see, I think we also are going to have to kind of look down here. This is also some stuff that they're doing to kind of cycle through the range of sheets. So let's comment that out. And let's run this again. So come over here, run. And, oh, I'm still... What did I do here? Import, not enough input arguments. That seems fishy because I just fixed this. Let's go ahead and run to this and see if we can debug this a little bit. F11. Oh, wait a second. Oh, sorry. Ha! So I completely called the wrong function name. Sorry. I don't know. Matlab must have a default thing called import model from Excel. So when I tab completed that, I just messed that up. So I tell you what, let's come back over here. Let's paste this. This is the actual function we're trying to call. Okay, now this should work. There we go. Okay, great. Now, although if you look at this, we notice, wait a second, it actually didn't get the range correct, so maybe I did a little bit of too much commenting, right? It actually imported the header as the first row of the table. I don't want that. So again, the nice thing about having your own custom function is we can modify this as we see fit. So this is the table that this function is spitting out, right? You can see. And all we're seeing is that it's accidentally adding this header row to the table. So I just don't want that. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and say something like remove the first row from the table, right? So this is literally something as simple as file structure D gets file structure D rows 2 to the end, all columns, right? So that's all I'm going to do. And now when I run this again, there we go. Now we've got our full 4x6 table. So now this function is working correctly. And in fact, let's just go ahead and verify for all of these guys. So here's number B, or file B. Yep, it read a 4x6 table. It filled in the NaNs and NaTs appropriately. So that works still. This one also works where now we've got an NaN in this first row. So again, we got a 4x6. So again, this was pass, 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 just like we saw earlier. And now let's look at this one. Remember, this failed earlier when we used normal read table by itself. But now let's use our customized version of read table. And now run this. Check it out. Now this thing works, right? Now we've got NaTs, NaNs in the first row and in the other location. So it nailed it this time. It got all the data and it filled it in appropriately. So now we can change this from a fail. This goes to a pass when we use our custom version, right? And same thing, let's go ahead and check this with this last one. This was sort of the hardest case. And again, yay, it's a pass, right? It got all 4 rows and it filled it in appropriately. So this is also a similar situation where It failed earlier with the default usage of readtable, but now with our customized version of readtable, this is no problem. And the reason I like having this customized function sitting out here in here, right, is now I can use this for different files. I mean, we already saw that with all of these different files that we had, but what if I have another file which might have more rows? So let's pretend I've got my coworker has a list of their file structure for their project. So again, if you look at this file, it's different, but it's got the same general structure, right? Now we've got 6 rows of data. And again, it's missing stuff all over the place, so readtable by itself might have a problem, but I can still use that same function that we made on this version of the file. So what I mean by that is, let's go and take a look, is I can now import my coworker's file using the exact same function, and hopefully this should be no problem. And there you go, right? It's got all 6 rows and 6 columns, right? So this is now same situation. It would have failed earlier, but now it's a pass. Okay? And again, maybe just for the sake of completeness, let's call out that I like having this function here and being able to modify it, because you saw here that I commented out this check here, because by default, I think what this function was doing, it was only pulling the first 4 rows of data, which would not have worked on my 6-row table over here. So again, having the function here so you can comment out this unwanted functionality and basically tune this function to the way you want it is very helpful. So this is a really helpful workflow of really you are just wrapping readtable with all of these options, but you don't have to remember how to write all of this. We can basically just use the import wizard to help us with this process. And this works not just for Excel files, it works for things like CSVs. So tell you what, let's go ahead and do a demonstration of that with CSVs as well. In fact, what I can do is let's come over here to this, and in fact, I've got a set of data that I can copy over. Let me do that right now. I'm going to copy over on my other screen, and I'm going to paste it in here. And what I'm going to paste is basically CSV versions of these Excel files. So these CSV files are basically the exact same thing, except now instead of being an XLSX file, right? Now it's a CSV file, right? With all the same same data effectively, just in a different file format, right? So again, here's this one where now you can see we're missing some stuff, all that kind of good stuff. So what we can now do is let's go ahead and do the similar process, but now with a CSV file. So tell you what, I'm going to start another script here, and same thing, I actually have this already, I think, prepared else off screen, so let me go ahead and import that now, some code. Alright, let me paste in my code here. So this is basically the exact same thing, but it's now using the CSV file. So let's go ahead and save this here. We're going to call this demo readtable CSV now. Okay. And let's do the exact same thing. Let's go ahead and show that readtable is going to have some problems. So I'll just run through this quickly. So this one worked, but we expected that. That's what we saw last time. B also works, just like we saw. C works by itself, just using normal readtable, right? That thing is a pass. But now we're going to run into some issues with D and E. So if I run this guy, aha, this thing failed. Like we saw, it missed the first row. And now E is probably going to miss 2 of them if we're being consistent. And yep, it indeed does. So this thing fails. Okay, so we saw readtable by itself doesn't work, so we're going to go ahead and come over to the import data wizard. And now let's look at the CSVs, and again, we're going to take a look at some of these that failed, like for example, E, right? Let's look at this one now for a little bit of difference. And you can see that, yep, same thing, it missed these first 2. So what we're going to do is go ahead, select all of these ones that we want, okay? And yep, this all looks good. And again, same thing, instead of importing the selection, I'm going to generate a function to do this. And you can see it is a little bit different. If I move this over so we can look at, here's the import Excel on the right, and now our import CSV on the left. Obviously now the CSV, we don't have things like workbook or sheet names or anything like that. You can't have multiple sheets within a CSV file. But it's very similar. right? So what we can do is let's go ahead and first Control S, save this into the same location. We're going to call this maybe now import CSV data.m. Let's go ahead and change the name of the file. So we're similar. And again, same thing. Let's go ahead and modify this guy so I don't... Actually, you know what? This might actually work. Like the way, if you read the code, it looks like... Yeah, it looks like if I don't specify the number of data lines, it's going to go from 2 to infinity, which is great. And again, just to call out a little bit of inconsistencies, you gotta watch this. On the Excel side, right, the autocode, earlier it put in a hard-coded maximum upper limit, which was the problem. This is why we wanted to comment this out earlier. But now in this case, we might be able to get away with it. Let's try this for fun, just to see if this is going to work. So let's go ahead and move this function over here. Okay, and now let's do our same thing. Instead of using our normal read table, let's go ahead and use our import CSV data function and see if this works. So again, let's just go through and check. So A, yep, that worked. In fact, maybe let's see if we can pull this over so we can see everything all at once. Maybe I'll try to squash this a little bit. And just to make sure, okay. So yep, that got your 4x6 table, so this is still passing. That guy is still passing. Run this again, F5, yep, that guy's passing. And now, here we go. Now this one is the one where we care about it. Let's run this again. I can F5 this. Aha! Yep. Now this got all of the data, right? So this turns into a pass. And same thing with E. Let's go ahead and run this guy. And yay, this one also goes to a pass, right? This is currently working. And again, same thing. Let's check now with my coworkers file structure. This one had 6 rows. Not 4, so really now we are going to be exercising this portion of the code of the imported bit, right, where we want to make sure that, hey, I'm not telling you which lines I care about, but hopefully this grabs the entire table. So let's run this, and yay, look at that, it did get it. It got a 6x6 with NANs and all of that stuff working. So this is now a pass. So there you have it. So to recap, here's a couple of ways to go about importing data into a table format in Matlab from either an Excel file or a CSV, but you can basically follow this workflow for any of these types of data that you're trying to import. So what I really recommend is, sure, you can try to use normal read table, just be a little bit careful. I really don't like to do that. I like to come up here to the import data wizard and have it help me understand what's going on with the import, especially with regard to these data types. And then I like to go ahead and create a function that I can then customize. So, you know, maybe while we're talking about that, maybe what I'll show you as an example. For example, like this critical file flag. In the data, I think we only had 1s and 0s, but what if I wanted this to have like or a string or something like that? Like I wanted to say, this file is not critical because of blah, 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 blah. I want to be able to add some kind of comment into this column. Right now, when it's trying to import that as a number, that's going to have a problem. Namely, this function might need to be modified because what it's currently doing is it's trying to treat this column right here for critical file as a double. Right? You might want that to be a string, and the nice thing about this function is it's as easy as doing this. Right? You can change this now to import this as a string, and now you should hopefully have no problem still. If you just change the function, you can come over here and let's go ahead and run this again. Right? So again, it still imports, right? But now what I could do is this critical file, let's go change this file here just to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So come in here, let's change my coworkers file structure.csv. Let's edit this thing here in like Notepad or something, right? I think critical file, it's like the last, it's the second to last one, right? Where is it? It's after the date, file size. Okay, right here. Yeah, this used to be 1s and 0s, but now I can say something like this file is not critical because it is auto-generated or something like that, right? I can now save this, okay? And now my modified version of my import CSV that treats it as a string should hopefully be able to pull that in no problem. And in fact, if I run this again, yay, look at that, right? It's basically NaNs or zeros or ones or this entire string that we were able to pull in. So this gives you an incredible amount of flexibility on how you want to import your data. You can play with it manually, you can manipulate it manually, and you can get it to do exactly what you want it to do for your application. So with that being said, I think this is probably a great spot to leave it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if so, I also hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. It really does help me continue making these videos. And remember, we have a lot more discussion on Matlab, Simulink, controls, general engineering, and mathematics on the channel. Please feel free to check it out. And the new videos come out every Monday, so hopefully I'll catch you at one of these future discussions, and we can all learn something new together. So until then, I think I'm going to sign off. Talk to you later. Bye.